All right. Are we ready for the jury? Just bring them in, please. Thank you. Appreciate y'all's compliance with our instruction. I placed that on the record, and I thank you for that. And we're ready now to continue. But before we start, I need to again ask each of you, please solemnly swear or affirm. You have at all times since we took our recess yesterday complied fully with the court's instruction by not talking about this case with anyone, including among yourselves. Not allowing anyone to speak to you. None of you have watched any newscasts or any news reports, not dating any account. Make that commitment, say I do. I do. Any member can't make that statement, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. All right, Solicitor, we're ready to continue. You may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time the state's ready to call Ron Witt to the stand.
Okay.
W-I-T-T.
And Mr. Witt, if you don't mind, where are you currently employed?
I work for T-Mobile Metro.
Okay. And if you don't mind, tell this jury what you do for T-Mobile.
I'm a senior testifier in the Law Enforcement Relations Group.
Okay. And are you familiar with the phone number 843-997-8152?
Yes.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to look what's already put into evidence. It states evidence number 54.
Okay.
If you don't mind, tell the jury first, what is that first page?
Certification letter.
Okay. And where does that come from?
It comes from our office.
Okay. And what does that indicate about the records?
It's just a, again, certification attesting to the accuracy of the records that were provided previously.
Okay. And if you don't mind, tell this jury, are those the records for 843-997-8152?
Yes.
Okay. And it has already been put in evidence as to the phone number of Sidney Moorer, which is 843-385-3175. Are you familiar with that number?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the times those two numbers had contact?
Yes.
Okay. From July to December?
Yes.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I'm going to show you. Mr. Witt, I'm showing you now what State's Exhibit 5064. Do you mind looking through there and telling me if you're familiar with those numbers and the number of contact? It should be everything except November.
Correct.
Okay. And is that the numbers you counted for the contact between Heather Elvis and Sidney Moorer?
Yes.
Okay. And do you mind going through that with the jury?
No.
Okay. And Your Honor, this time, can we admit 64 into evidence?
Your objection.
Is that demonstrative evidence, Your Honor?
Yes, let's go ahead and have it.
Was the phone records, I think that's something that they created.
These are just the number of times they had contact.
It's really, it's taken from the Exhibit 54 and condensed it to
Oh,
this.
John.
Any objection?
No.
Very well, it would be admitted. State's Exhibit 64 is admitted.
Thank you, Judge. And if you don't mind, I'm going to put this on the screen, Mr. Witt, so we can talk about it. And just so everybody's clear, these are the records for Heather Elvis, 9978152.
Yes.
And you're telling us the number of times that number has contact with Sidney Moorer at 3853175.
The slides are a summary of the contact is between those two numbers.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if you don't mind, tell us from July 17th until August the 1st.
Between the 17th of July to the 31st of July 2013, there were 862 total calls and text on the records. Calls to Sidney Moorer, there were 198 calls and text, and then calls from Sidney Moorer, 213 for a total of 411 out of the 862 on the record.
So out of 862 entries, 411 of them were between Sidney Moorer and Heather Elvis.
Correct.
Okay, and 198 of them are her reaching out to him.
Outgoing, correct.
That's right, and 213 is Sidney Moorer, the defendant, reaching out to Heather Elvis.
Correct.
Okay, and how about August?
In August, total 1,540 activity on the phone for that month. Of those, calls to Sidney Moorer, or calls and text 213, and the calls and text from Sidney Moorer, there's 351 for a total of 564.
Okay, so calls to, again, is Heather Elvis contacting Sidney Moorer.
Correct.
And calls from is the defendant contacting her 351 times.
Correct.
Okay, and if you don't mind, that's for just the month of August.
Correct.
Okay, so we're talking over 500 times they have contact.
Yes.
Okay, and how about September?
Again, September, the 1,426 entries on the account for September. Of those, outgoing to Sidney Moorer, there were 208, and incoming from Sidney Moorer, there was 350 for a total of 558.
Okay, and again, when you say calls to, that is Heather Elvis by text or phone calls reaching out to Sidney Moorer?
Yes.
And when you say...
He's answered the question. You don't need to restate it. Okay?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes,
Thank
sir. And do you know how much contact they had in October?
Yes.
And if you don't mind, tell the jury about that.
I'm sorry?
Tell the jury how many times she reached out to Sidney Moorer.
Of the 1,037 total entries for October, 199 were outgoing to Sidney Moorer, and 318 were incoming from Sidney Moorer, for a total of 517.
Okay. And if you don't mind, Mr. Witt, I skipped November because I wanted you to look at the records and tell this jury from the records if Sidney Moorer, that phone number, sent Heather Elvis any multimedia messages during the month of November.
Okay. Yes.
And what date did he send a multimedia message?
On the 2nd of November 2013, 2nd of November 2013, there were two incoming picture messages. MMS Multimedia also a picture message.
Okay. So if you don't mind, tell this jury what a multimedia message is.
It's when you use a text platform to send a picture or receive a picture.
Okay. And again, tell them the dates of when he sent her a picture.
There were two that were sent on the 2nd of November
Jim,
2000.
one more question again, is this telephone number that's sending this stuff, and she's asked Sidney Moorer send it.
Overruled objection, that's cross-examination.
No, this is direct, is it?
Excuse me.
Oh, you mean it's from me, of course, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I think you
I
don't
know.
have a chance to ask you that question. I'm sure you will.
And how many multimedia messages were sent from Sidney Moorer to Heather Elvis's phone?
Two.
Okay. And what dates were they?
Both were on the same date, the 11th of November 2013.
Okay. And how many times, if you don't mind, in November did they have contact?
I have to object, I think I misheard, he said 11th of November or November 2nd?
No, it says 11, there were two on the 11th, what I heard his testimony. So you want to again,
All right, sir.
overruled objection, you can clarify.
You want to use sheet of paper?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. That's a marked exhibit you just handed me, right? It had a tag on
Mr. Witt, are you going to mark on it?
No, I was going to write on the back of this. Well, this got that's all right. This
Okay.
is
Let me
you
get
have
a
another
sheet of
sheet?
paper, Your Honor.
it. Here, there's a sheet of paper.
Just, thank you. Thank you. Do you want to designate between incoming and outgoing?
Just, yes,
Or
sir.
just total?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind. It's drastically less, so if you don't mind, just let this jury know how many times she reached out to him and how many he reached out to her.
Okay?
Okay. How many were from Heather Elvis to Sidney Moore in November?
There were 22 outgoing,
Outgoing, yep, how many?
22,
22. How many were incoming to Heather from Sidney Moore?
39.
Okay. So drastically less than we've seen so far.
Yes,
Okay. And 2 of those were multimedia messages from the defendant to Heather Elvis.
correct.
Okay. And if you don't mind, tell us about December.
I'm sorry?
How many were phone calls were there in December?
Of the total 1,000 activity on the account, there were 6 outgoing to Sidney Moore, and there were no incoming.
Okay. Now, looking at her phone records, was there another call ever made from that phone after December 18th at 3:41 a.m.?
No.
Tell this jury, is that phone line for Heather Elvis still active to this day?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
And that phone has never made another call out from December up until today?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any indication by looking at the phone records that that phone was ever on and able to operate after December 18th at 3:41 a.m.?
No.
Now, if you don't mind, tell this jury, I'm not going to get into a lot of it, but those phone records also have tower
Objection.
data.
Leaving the witness stated.
Those phone records also have tower data, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Had she ever hit off that tower that she was hitting off of December 18th at 3:41 a.m., had she ever hit off that tower before?
No.
If you don't mind, Mr. Witt, I just got one more question. Tell us the dates on those multimedia messages in November
The date?
from the defendant to Heather Elvis in November. There were, I think you testified to 2 multimedia messages, and I think there's some confusion about what the date was.
It's the, well, the records are, it's the 2nd of November, but the time is 11:51, and the time zone is specific, so you would add 3 hours. So it's actually the morning of the 3rd of November.
Okay. And that, so both were on November the 2nd?
On the records, it's November the 2nd.
Okay.
Text and picture messages, the time zone is Pacific time,
Okay.
where calls are local time.
Okay.
So you would add 3 hours. It's 11:51 p.m. on the record, so it would actually be the morning of the 3rd.
Okay. And so what
2:51.
time on the morning of the 3rd?
First text was at, they're both at 11:51, just a few seconds apart, so that'd be 2:51 a.m. on the 3rd.
Okay. No further questions,
So we've heard testimony that Tammy Moore sent a picture to Heather Elvis in November. Would that be consistent with what you're talking about, being media?
Multimedia is also a picture message.
Picture, yeah. And then the text messaging, when you say in November, 22 outgoing and however many there were in November, you're talking about each individual text or sent or received would be counted as one. So if there's a text,
The 39 and the 3922 were, I didn't look and see if there was a call or text. I just counted the number.
Okay.
And broke it down between incoming and outgoing.
so it could be that on November 2nd, that's the last date that you have that there's any contact between these two phones. Is that correct? November
That was
2nd?
the multimedia. I'd have to look at the date when the last activity. I just went through the whole month. I didn't focus on a day. I just focused on the numbers incoming and outgoing between those two numbers.
Right, so the ingoing, outgoing between those two numbers, the last date you have is November 2nd.
Actually, the last activity is the 5th of November.
And what is that activity?
It's an outgoing call from the 85152 to 3175.
So that's an outgoing call from Heather to,
Outgoing text, I'm sorry, stand corrected. Outgoing text.
on November 5th.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's 11/5, there's an outgoing text from Heather
Correct.
to the phone number they've associated with Sidney Moorer.
Correct.
And after that, there's no other between those two people.
Verify. Right. For the month of November, that was the last activity.
And then we saw the chart on December that there were 6 from Heather to Sidney Moorer and 0 from Sidney Moorer to Heather.
Outgoing, yes.
Okay. And after 12/18, at that particular time in the early morning, you testified there's never not been any activity since then on that.
There's been no activity between the two?
No, I mean, any activity at all from the 8152?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if that phone SIM card was removed and replaced with another one, would you have that data from that SIM card?
It would show in the same records. We
Okay.
search by number.
Okay. So the SIM card has nothing to do with anything?
The SIM card the handset just makes the SIM card active.
Okay.
So as long as a handset is that SIM card will work in a certain handphone, you could put it in multiple handsets. The system doesn't know what handset it's in, it just knows that it's in a handset that works.
Okay. So if you took the SIM card from 8152 phone and put it into a different phone, would you be able to have those records?
It would show anything, right. When we do a search, it would show up.
Because how you identify activity is from the SIM card, not the actual device.
Yes, the system looks for a number, not, again, the handset just makes the SIM card, adds
So if
power
you
to the
took,
SIM card.
right, so if you took a different SIM card and put it in that handset, you wouldn't know if that phone's being used or not. Not the number, but that phone.
Well, you'd have to do a reverse search based on the IMEI number of the handset
Okay, is
to
that
show that there's another SIM card in the handset,
And I'm just curious why I'm asking, has that been done?
not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, going back to November, if you could tell me again, there was 22 outgoing, the numbers you came up with for November, and we're talking again between 8152 and the 4, and the number associated with Mr. Moore,
3175, correct.
3175. November numbers, if you could give me those again, because that wasn't on the chart. Can you give me those numbers again?
I counted 22 outgoing and 39 incoming.
So 22 outgoing from 8152,
Correct.
and how many, what was the next one?
39 incoming. 22 outgoing, 39 incoming.
And that was on November 2nd.
Well, for the month of November.
Okay. So, I mean, what I'm asking is this, can that be, like in other words, in your counting, can one of your numbers be a text message that was sent?
Well, again, I didn't break it down between calls and texts. I just counted the total number between those two numbers.
Okay. So could one of the numbers you used be a single text?
Well, Each text shows up, whether it's a call or a text, it has its own individual entry in the system.
Okay. So are these text or phone calls?
Again, I didn't break them down. I'd have to go back through and count, see what was.
So my question is simply this. Out of the 22 outgoing and 39 incoming, could any of those be text?
Yes,
Okay. Could all of them be text?
they could be.
Okay. Could they be a text conversation back and forth over a short period of time?
There could be incoming and outgoing text, correct.
Okay. When you're going through, let me ask you if you can identify this document.
Can I get a look at that?
You will, you just, first of all, let me identify first, so let's do then, whether can is moving into.
That's not familiar with that document.
Okay.
Okay. You've never seen an extraction report for a phone before?
You said you have not familiar with the document.
You familiar with this document?
No.
Do you have any idea from any of the work that you've done what the texts were in these 22 and 39 calls in November? Do you have any of the subject matter?
But the content, no.
Okay. 1 second.
Sir.
Have you still got the exhibit up there with you?
Yeah. Which one? The phone calls?
Everything that she gave you.
That's the phone calls, and that's the other one.
Did you determine in your work who the account holder was for this phone?
Yes.
And who was that?
I'd have to have the subscriber page to see the complete information. I didn't commit it to, the subscriber page, I didn't commit the information to memory.
So you don't know who the account holder for this phone is?
Again, I didn't commit the information to memory.
Okay. Do you have it with you anywhere?
I do not know.
Yeah, I need 1 second to get to a certain page. All right, so again, I just want to make sure that these documents don't have any content of text.
No.
And you don't know anything about that.
No.
Do you have any knowledge, or can you say who used either of these two phones?
No.
Okay. And at the time any of these ingoing or outgoing transactions or texts were made, you don't know who was actually using the device and sending it or receiving it?
No.
All right. That's all I have.
Very well, read the record.
Yes, sir, just one question. Mr. Witt, do you remember Mr. Treslow asking you how many calls there were from his defendant to Heather Elvis in December?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember him asking you about how many phone calls there were from his defendant 3175 to Heather Elvis
In November, yes.
in December?
I don't recall him asking me about December.
Okay. Were there any calls from the defendant to the victim in December?
There were, in December, there were 6 calls to Sidney Moorer from the Apex line to them.
From Sidney Moorer, he said he's testified he doesn't know who used the device, who used the phone.
Again, you've made that point. She's phrasing the question, the jury understands that it's a phone number. So let's please, that
I will.
really needs to
Just
phrase
one-
the question properly. Please.
I will. Just one last thing. Mr. Witt, if you don't mind can you write down the last phone call that was made from her phone and the time? I'm gonna bring this up for you, if you don't mind. We've already had a couple people write on it. We're just gonna add to it as we go. We're running time. Thank you. You mind stepping down, just adding it right up here. Miss Pop, can you hold this press, please? This thing is crazy. Just hold it from behind. If you don't mind, add her last phone call, just the time and the number it was to. Thank you, Mr. Witt. I got no further questions.
Yes, sir.
While I'm looking at this, I wanted to ask a follow-up question. If there was a SIM card from a different carrier than your company, would you be able to have that device?
No.
So if that device was taken and a SIM card put into it that was not from your carrier, you wouldn't have that information of if that phone was being used or not?
No.
Okay. And again, if you look at this exhibit she gave you, December, we just talked about calls from 3175 to 8152. How many?
0.
That's all.
Very well. You may come down, sir. You wish the witness to be excused.
Yes, please, Your Honor.
You're also free to leave, sir. Thank you. Call your next witness, please.
Now, the state will call Aaron Evans to the stand.
Okay.
So if you wait right here for me. Just raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible. You solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God.
My name is Aaron Edens, E-D-E-N-S.
Good morning, Mr. Evans.
Good morning.
Where do you currently live?
Castro Valley, California.
Castro Valley. Where is that located out in California?
The San Francisco Bay Area, south of Oakland.
How long have you lived in California?
Most of my adult life.
Where do you currently work?
I'm an intelligence analyst with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office in California.
And what's your current position? So you're an intelligence analyst, you stated?
That's correct.
What's your current assignment, or where are you assigned as an intelligence analyst?
I'm assigned to the Northern California high-intensity drug trafficking area.
What all does it entail being an intelligence analyst on that Northern California high-intensity drug trafficking area that you stated?
We support various federal, state, local, and tribal initiatives to combat narcotics trafficking and dismantle drug trafficking organizations.
Now, Mr. Edens, how long have you worked for the, and I'm going to butcher this name, San Mateo
Yes, sir.
County Sheriff's Office?
That's correct. 6 months.
6 months. When did you begin when did you begin your career in law enforcement?
In February 2001,
Where did you begin your career?
I was a police officer with the city of Hayward, California,
What was your first assignment at the Hayward City Police Department?
patrol officer.
And following your time as a patrol officer, what did you do next?
I was assigned as a detective to the intelligence division.
About what years was that?
It's going to be 2001 to 2003 was patrol, and then 2004 until 2010.
Your time as a detective, what was your duties and obligations?
I investigated major narcotics, organized crime, public corruption, and internal criminal investigations involving police officers.
Now, besides your work at the Hayward City Police Department, did you have any other assignments or any other involvement with other law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
During my time as a detective, I was assigned to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, this was commonly referred to as the FBI?
Yes, I did.
What was the purpose or intent of that joint task force through the FBI?
The purpose was to investigate and interdict international terrorists.
And what was your principal function or task on that task force?
I was cross-designated as a Deputy United States Marshal, and my function was to act as an investigator with the federal department.
And how long were you with that task force?
5 years.
Mr. Edens, are you familiar with an area of forensics forensic cell phone examinations?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any certifications in that profession?
Yes, I do.
When did you get that certification?
In 2005,
And what exactly is the correct title of that certification, just so I'm saying it right?
cell phone forensic investigations.
What all the cell phone forensic investigations entail?
Involves attempting to recover evidence from mobile devices,
What sort of evidence?
pictures, videos, text messages, call logs, phone books, internet history.
Is there anything more about the device that area encompasses?
It also encompasses obtaining information from the cellular service provider, the operating system provider, and applications.
Okay. The cell phone service provider, is that T-Mobile, AT&T, and those sort of companies?
Verizon, T-Mobile.
Okay. And the operating system provider, what are the two main operating system providers in cell phones?
The Android operating system by Google and the iOS by Apple.
In regards to forensic cell phone investigations or cell phone forensics, what prior trainings have you attended in that area?
I have about 600 hours of formal classroom training in the investigation of mobile devices and the other data sets from providers, applications, and operating systems.
During the course of your training, how many forensic examinations have you completed?
Between 12 and 1,300.
Do you yourself teach any courses?
I do.
How long have you taught those courses?
Since 2008.
Who do you normally teach them to?
I normally teach for the California Narcotic Officers Association, but I also teach for other groups.
What other groups have you taught?
I taught for the Narcotic Officers Associations for New England states, Utah, Georgia. I've also taught for the Dallas Police Department, the California District Attorneys Association, and the Kentucky Prosecutors.
How have you been received when you have taught those courses?
Well, I get an evaluation. Each student is asked to fill out an evaluation after they attend the class. It's 1 through 5, and they get a rated of 4.9.
I'm sorry, did you ever have any negative feedback in regards to your trainings from the people you've taught?
Not that I recall.
Okay. All right. Do you have any publications or articles that you have written in the area of cell phone forensics?
I have.
What were those?
I have an article published in the Journal of the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Technology and the Utah State Trooper magazine.
And have you written any books?
Yes, I
Or
have.
what books have you written in the area of cell phone forensics?
I've written 12 books that cover cell phone investigations, application investigations, social media investigations.
Have you written or done any articles specifically in regards to location information about cell phones?
Yes, I have.
Location information about cell phones, is that a subset of cell phone forensics?
It is.
And have you received extensive training in that area?
Yes, I have.
Now, Mr. Edens, have you testified in court before?
Yes, I have.
Have you testified as an expert in court before?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
Between 7 and 10 times.
In what courts have you been qualified?
Alameda County Superior Court,
And in what areas have you been qualified?
cell phone forensics, and location information using mobile devices.
How many of those times that you testified was the location of the cell phone at issue?
More than half of those times.
Your Honor, this time I would tender Mr. Edens as an expert in cell phone forensics.
No objection. Mr. Rowley, permitted to render opinion to that.
Mr. Edens, specific to the location information of a phone, how can that be useful in an investigation?
It depends on the type of the investigation. It can show us patterns of activity over a long period of time, or it can show us specific locations during a shorter event-specific period of time.
How successful in your experience in law enforcement have you been able to use it?
Personally,
Yes.
very successful.
Now, Mr. Edens, in regards to this case, were you asked to focus on a time frame?
Yes, I was.
Well, first off, whose cell phone were you tasked with attempting to locate?
Heather Elvis.
What sort of phone or device did she have, if you know?
It was a Samsung SGH T999, which is commonly referred to as a Samsung Galaxy S3.
And Mr. Edens, what were you asked to do again in regards to the case we're here on today?
I was asked to examine location records that have been obtained by one of the investigating detectives.
And what time frame again were you asked to look at?
That was December 17, 2013 through December 18, 2013.
And for the purposes of court today, were you asked to focus on any times in particular?
I was.
What times were those?
From 1:13 in the morning forward.
Now, Mr. Edens, let me ask you, in examining this case and your involvement as an expert here, what records did you review to help you in forming an expert opinion?
I examined the call detail records provided by T-Mobile that were associated with Heather Elvis's phone number. I used the Google location history records that had been obtained by the detective during the initial investigation. I looked at the cell tower locations in Horry County and the surrounding 5 counties for 2013 and 2015. I examined the search warrant results that Google provided in response to the warrant from the solicitor's office.
Google, what relevance does Google have to the case we're here on?
Well, Google is the developer of the Android operating system, and that's the operating system that Heather Elvis's phone used.
I want to first address the cell site and call detail records that you discussed. What is the significance of the T-Mobile records for phone number 843-997-8152?
I'm sorry, the significance of them?
Yes.
They show incoming, outgoing phone calls, the duration of the call, the beginning and ending cell site used for the call.
And do you know who is that phone number associated with?
Heather Elvis.
Heather Elvis. All right. Now, you mentioned something called cell towers, beginning and ending cell towers used. How is that helpful in determining the location of a phone?
And the cell towers can show the general movement of a device over an area.
And as far as the cell tower location information that you said you reviewed for both 2013 and 2015, how is that beneficial in determining the location of a phone?
That's not beneficial. That was done to see if there were any new cell sites placed in the area that would affect my later examination.
All right. Now, the cell phone tower data, the cell phone call details, are those documents or records that are normally used or commonly used by experts in your field?
Yes, routinely.
Are they commonly used to assist in the location of a cell phone?
That would be case contingent. In some instances, the location information is so generic as to not be useful. In others, it can be highly accurate and very beneficial in an investigation.
Okay. Now you mentioned three things involving Google, and you mentioned Google location records.
Yes.
If you could, what are those?
The Android operating system distributed by Google collects location data on devices that use the Android operating system if the user has a Google account or a Gmail account associated with it.
Why does Google keep this information?
They use it for location-aware search results, so that if you search for a restaurant, they'll know that you're looking for a restaurant in Myrtle Beach as opposed to looking at one in Oakland, California. They also use it to provide location-specific advertising to the mobile device.
What sort, and you already mentioned this, but Heather Elvis had, you commonly said it's a Samsung Galaxy S3.
Yes.
What sort of operating system does that have?
That has the Android operating system.
Would Google store information for that sort of phone?
If Heather Elvis had a Gmail account and used that Android device, yes, it would.
And based on the records you reviewed, did Google store location information for that device?
Yes, they did.
Now, how does Google determine where your phone is?
Google takes advantage of a system built into the cell phone known as AGPS, which stands for Assisted Global Positioning System.
Can you tell the court a little bit more about that?
The assisted GPS system uses three different technologies to try and determine the location of the phone. The first is Global Positioning System. In the event that it's not able to obtain a location using GPS, it will revert to Wi-Fi. And if it can't get a location information via Wi-Fi, it will use cell site location information.
GPS, what does that mean? What does that term mean?
Global Positioning System refers to the system of satellites that are in geosynchronous orbit around the planet. These satellites broadcast signals that are received by the receiver on the mobile device and translates it into location data.
And you mentioned the word Wi-Fi. What exactly is Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi is wireless fidelity. It's a system used to transmit data over radio waves.
Is that like a router in the house?
Yeah, a wireless access point in your house.
And you mentioned cell site. Specifically tell the court what that is.
The phone always attempts to communicate with cell sites, and there's a communication that occurs back and forth. One of the location technologies is sometimes referred to as triangulation, which is not the proper term. It's multilateration is the correct nomenclature, but it reads signals from multiple different cell sites to come up with a general location for the device.
How does Google decide which one of those three that you mentioned, GPS, Wi-Fi, or cell site, to use?
Well, it tries to use GPS first, but GPS has some limitations to it, and then if it's not able to obtain a GPS signal, it will revert to one of the other technologies.
Why would it try to use GPS first?
It's most accurate.
How accurate can GPS be?
Google reports accuracy as close as 5 meters. The available literature suggests that it's probably more like 11 meters, so roughly 33 feet.
It's about 12 yards on a football field.
Correct.
How accurate can the Wi-Fi, or how accurately can Google determine the location of a cell phone based on Wi-Fi information?
Wi-Fi, again, similar to GPS, it has its drawbacks, and one of them is signal strength. If there's something that interferes with the signal, it can be difficult to obtain a location using Wi-Fi. But as a general rule, Wi-Fi ranges are anywhere between 20 and 50 meters.
20 to 50 meters, that is How many feet is that, just for
It's,
reference?
3.3 feet to a meter, so 60 to 150 meters, 60 to 150.
Thank you, Mr. Edens. I was glad you did the math on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, I wanted to call it triangulation, but you said it's not triangulation. It's multilateral, or, I'm sorry, what was it called again?
It's multilateration.
Okay, multilateration. How accurate can that be?
It depends on the density of cell sites in a particular area. In a high-density urban population where there are cell sites littering a particular region, it can be very accurate. In areas that are rural or suburban, it can be less accurate.
Would you say around Horry County, how accurate would it be?
There are not a lot of cell sites in Horry County. The geography is flat. It doesn't look like the providers have needed to enhance their capabilities. So the location accuracy in this area is probably within miles.
So Google might be off on your location if they relied on cell site data?
Yes.
And how far could they be off in Horry County?
They could be, you might get a location that could be somewhere within 2 to 5 miles.
Mr. Edens, is Google concerned about where you are specifically?
They have an interest in knowing where you're at.
Would GPS, so GPS being the most accurate, would that be the first way that Google would attempt to obtain?
It's the first and the primary method that it attempts to get location data.
What would be the second?
The second would be Wi-Fi.
And what would be the last effort, basically?
Cell tower, cell site.
Mr. Eden, these Google records that you reviewed, are they helpful in determining the location of a cell phone?
They are.
What all Google records did you look at again?
I looked at 2 sets of Google records. The first one had been obtained by one of the investigating detectives, and then the second set was obtained by the solicitor's office.
Okay. In addition to looking at the Google records, the T-Mobile call details, and the T-Mobile tower data, did you do anything else to help you in forming your expert opinion about the location of Heather Elvis' cell phone?
Yes, I did.
What'd you do?
I came to Horry County in July of last year.
What was the purpose of that?
The purpose was to use a similar device on the T-Mobile operating system and measure the location data to see how accurate the results from Google were.
And did you have a chance to go to several areas of Horry County during that time?
Yes, I did.
And was that helpful to your investigation?
It was.
Mr. Edens, has anything been prepared to help you relate to the jury your findings in this case?
Yes, I prepared a report, and also there's a PowerPoint presentation.
Regarding, in particular, the PowerPoint presentation, let me show you what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit number 65. Mr. Edens, please take a look at what's been marked as State's Exhibit 65 for identification. Does that appear to be the PowerPoint that's been prepared?
Yes, it does.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate account of your findings in regards to the location of Heather Elvis' cell phone?
Give me 1 minute there, Solicitor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it does.
Is this a visual representation of the report that you stated you created in this case?
Yes, it is.
Are there any material differences between that PowerPoint and the report which contains your findings?
No, there's not.
Now, Mr. Edens, are you going to be able to remember every specific detail of your report when presenting those slides to the jury?
No, I will not.
Is there something that would assist you?
Copy of the presentation.
Have you had a copy?
Yes, I have.
Did you make notes on it?
Yes, I did.
Would those notes assist in refreshing your recollection?
They would.
Your Honor, I'd ask permission for the witness to refer to his copy of the outline as well as his notes in presenting these slides.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Regarding State's Exhibit number 65 for identification, I would tender that into evidence of State's Exhibit 65. The PowerPoint presentation.
No, sir.
And Your Honor, I'd ask to publish it to the jury. I'd ask the clerk of court's assistance in turning the lights down. I'm going to move up here to get out of your way. Mr. Evans, regarding this slide of the PowerPoint, what or how does it show your findings?
This represents the totality of the location records for the time frame of 1:13 to 2:31 in the morning.
And where did you find that Heather Elvis' cell phone was located during that time frame?
In and around her residence,
And whose residence was that?
Heather Elvis's.
And how long was she at that residence?
At this point, between 1:13 in the morning and 2:31, so roughly an hour and 16 minutes.
How certain are you of this location?
Very certain.
What information did you rely on to become certain?
I relied on the GPS data and Wi-Fi data for that location.
How many pieces of data did you have available to make your determination?
There were 77 location records during this time frame.
And how many of those were the most reliable GPS?
37 of them were GPS,
And what else was there?
and then 40 Wi-Fi location records.
You've also had a chance to testify to review the phone records in this case.
I did.
Was there any phone activity from Heather Elvis' phone during the time frame of this location?
Yes, it was.
What activity was there?
There was one incoming phone call and 3 outgoing phone calls.
Can you please tell the jury a little bit more about the details of those calls?
Sure. At 1:35 and 16 seconds, there was an incoming phone call from phone number 843-444-2462 that lasted 298.8 seconds.
Okay. And in your investigation, have you been able to determine what phone belongs to that phone number, 843-444-2462?
That's a payphone.
Was there any other call activity from Heather Elvis' payphone at that location during that time frame?
There were 3 additional outgoing phone calls.
What was the next one?
The next one was at 1:44 and 39 seconds. There was an outgoing phone call to phone number 609-412-3938 that lasted 132 seconds.
And through your investigation, do you know whose phone number that is?
That phone number is associated with Bree, and I apologize for her last name, Worlman.
Yes. What was the next phone call?
The next one was an outgoing phone call at 2:29 and 48 seconds in the morning to phone number 843-444-2462 that lasted 12 seconds.
And what was what phone number, or what phone, was associated with that phone number?
That was the same payphone.
And how long did that call last?
12 seconds.
What does that tell you about the phone call? Was there a conversation in your opinion?
It's impossible to determine if there was a phone call. It would be very short, or the phone just could have rang. I don't have that information.
Yes, sir. What was the 4th phone call from this location in that time frame?
At 2:30 and 15 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 4.8 seconds.
And what number or phone is that number associated with?
The same payphone.
Please show the next slide. Mr. Evans, how does this slide reflect your findings?
This slide is a combination of several different location records over a span of time over different locations that started at 2:32 and 57 seconds in the morning and ended at 2:41 and 25 seconds.
You stated earlier that you had visited Horry County. Have you visited this area of Horry County?
Yes, I have.
The line on the PowerPoint slide, what does that reflect?
That's a direct line between the 2 points in data, and that roughly overlaps River Oaks Drive.
What does this slide reflect as far as the movement of Heather Elvis' cell phone?
This is the likely path of travel of her phone from the White River Drive to Carolina Forest Boulevard.
And how certain or how much surety do you have in this location information?
I have confidence in the location data as well as the route traveled.
How many how much data did you have to rely upon and what kind of data?
I had one Wi-Fi location record in the area of the White River Drive address. I had 4 GPS records near the intersection of River Oaks Drive and Black Creek, and in between them I had 3 cell site records.
Please show the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back one slide, excuse me. I got to ask you, was there any phone activity on Heather Elvis' phone during this time frame?
Yes, there was.
What was it?
There was an outgoing phone call at 2:32 and 57 seconds.
And what phone number was it to?
843-444-2462.
I know you've already stated, but what phone is associated with that phone number?
The payphone.
Thank you. Now, next slide. Mr. Edens, how does this slide reflect your findings?
This accurately reflects my findings.
How does it?
It shows the consolidation of the location records from 2:42 and 14 seconds to 2:56 and 11 seconds.
Where does it show Heather Elvis' phone being located?
At this point, her phone is located to the rear of 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard.
And have you had a chance to visit that location?
I did.
What is that location?
Longbeard's Restaurant.
And where in particular was Heather's phone located in the parking lot of Longbeard's?
The majority of the location records were in the northeast corner of the parking lot where there are dumpsters.
How long was Heather Elvis in this location? Or how long was Heather Elvis' phone, in this location?
Roughly 14 minutes.
And what, if any, phone activity was there on Heather Elvis' phone at that location?
There were 4 outgoing phone calls.
Would you please state what the first call was to?
At 2:43 and 02 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to phone number 843-444-2462 that lasted 7.2 seconds.
And again, whose phone number is that?
That's the payphone.
What was the second call?
Second phone call was at 2:43 and 36 seconds. It was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 7.8 seconds.
And is that the payphone as well?
That is the payphone as well.
And the next call?
At 2:45 and 9 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 0.2 seconds.
And was there the last call?
At 2:51 and 20 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 4.8 seconds.
And that number again was the payphone?
That was.
How many coordinates did you have to rely upon in forming your opinion on this?
I had 13 GPS records.
And again, GPS being the most accurate?
Yes.
Next slide, please. How does this slide reflect your findings?
It accurately reflects my findings.
And what were those findings in regards to this time frame? And would you state the time frame?
Sure. This reflects the movement of Heather Elvis' cell phone from 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard to a location on Augusta Plantation Drive and then a return back to Longbeard's or to 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard.
And what was the time frame in which you did this trip and return?
At 2:57 and 4 seconds through 3:01 and 57 seconds.
Again, the 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard, you visited that area?
I did.
What's located there?
Longbeard's Restaurant.
Did you visit the Augusta Plantation Drive area?
I did.
What's located there?
The entrance to a housing complex.
Was there any phone activity on Heather Elvis' phone there at this time frame?
There was not.
And what data did you rely upon in forming your opinion in regards to her location movement, or the phone's location movement at this point?
I had 4 GPS records and 1 cell site record.
Next slide. Does this fairly accurately reflect your findings?
It does.
What were those findings?
Those findings were that from 3:02 and 42 seconds to 3:15 and 08 seconds, that Heather Elvis's phone was located back in the area of 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard.
And let me ask you about the two circles on that slide. What is the significance of the two green circles?
Well, the larger the green circles represents the totality of the phone records for that area. There was a separate set of records away from the main set of records that was located down on Carolina Forest Boulevard in between the roadway and the retention pond.
Okay. And what information or what data did you have to rely upon forming your opinions in regards to this location then?
I had 15 GPS records.
And was there any phone activity on Heather Elvis's phone during this time frame?
There was.
What activity was there?
There were 2 outgoing phone calls.
What was the first one?
The first one was at 03:04 and 36 seconds. It was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 1.8 seconds.
And again, was that the payphone?
That was the payphone.
Was there another call?
There was at 03:05 and 55 seconds. There was an outgoing phone call to 843-444-2462 that lasted 9 seconds. The payphone.
Yes, sir. Next slide. Does this fairly accurately reflect your findings?
It does.
And what were your findings in regards to the location data in this time frame?
My findings were that between 3:16 and 22 seconds and 3:19 and 23 seconds, Heather Elvis's phone moved from 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard to White River Drive.
And White River Drive, what was the significance of that again?
That was her residence.
What, if any, phone activity was there during this trip?
There were 2 outgoing phone calls.
What were they?
At 03:16 and 35 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-385-3175 that lasted 7.8 seconds.
Whose phone number was that?
Sidney Moorer.
Was there another phone call?
There was at 3:17 and 35 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-385-3175 that lasted 249 seconds.
How many minutes is 249 seconds?
Divided by 4.
4 minutes and 9 seconds?
Yes.
And whose phone number was that to again?
Sidney Moorer.
Next slide. Mr. Edens, does this reflect your findings accurately?
Yes, it does.
And what were your findings in regards to the time frame of 3/20/23 to 3/24/23?
That Heather Elvis's phone was stationary in the area of the parking lot of White River Drive.
Does your data show that she went into the residence?
It does not show that.
And how accurate was your, or how many data points did you have to form your opinion on this case?
I had 5 GPS records.
Again, GPS records being the most accurate.
That's correct.
What, if any, phone activity took place in this location?
There was a continuation of the call, the prior phone call, that lasted 4 minutes, and from the prior phone call from 843-385-3175.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Does this fairly accurately reflect your findings in regards to Heather Elvis's phone's movement between 3:25:29 and 3:35:12 a.m.?
Yes, it does.
And what were those findings?
That Heather Elvis's phone moved from White River Drive to Forest Brook Road, to Peachtree Road, and then to Peachtree Boat Landing.
Was there any activity on her phone during this time frame?
As far as calling activity?
Yes, sir.
No, there was not.
How certain, or how many data points did you have to rely upon in forming this opinion?
I had 8 GPS and 3 cell site.
Next slide. So does this fairly accurately reflect your findings in regards to Heather Elvis's phone at 3:37:32 a.m.?
It does.
And what were your findings?
My finding was that Heather Elvis's phone was located at the Peachtree Boat Landing.
And if you had a chance to visit that boat landing,
I have.
is that boat landing located at the end of Peachtree Road?
Yes, it is.
Where exactly, or if you can tell, was she within that green circle?
Yes.
How certain are you?
I'm confident that her phone was within that circle.
How much data did you have to run?
I have 1 GPS record.
Is that certain enough? Does that make you certain?
That makes me certain.
While the phone was there, what if any home call activity was there?
There were 4 outgoing phone calls.
And would you please state the details of the first one?
The first one was an outgoing phone call at 3:38 and 14 seconds to phone number 843-385-3175 that lasted 1.8 seconds.
Whose phone number is that?
Sidney Moorer.
When was the next call?
At 3:39 and no seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-385-3175 that lasted 1.8 seconds.
Is that Sidney Moorer again?
It is Sidney Moorer.
Next call.
At 3:39 and 46 seconds, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-385-3175 that lasted 1.8 seconds.
Sidney Moorer.
Sidney Moorer.
Last call.
At 3:41:05, there was an outgoing phone call to 843-385-3175 that lasted 1.8 seconds.
Lastly, whose number is that again?
Sidney Moorer.
Was there anything unique about this order?
This was the last location that we obtained using, that there was a GPS record for.
Next slide. Series. What is the relevance of this slide?
This slide shows that at 3:42 and 27 seconds that there was a cell site location hit in this general area, in this area.
And again, how reliable are cell site hits?
Cell site is the least reliable. In this particular case, the cell tower involved was a second generation cell tower, so it's very old technology. This is not likely a reliable location record.
Now, you have visited the area of Peachtree Landing. In your opinion, would it be possible to get from Peachtree Landing to the area where the records say her phone was in that time period?
To get from 337 over there 5 minutes, absent a helicopter or a jetpack, there's no way.
Do you believe that her phone was located in the area that the records reflected it to be located in?
I believe that the phone was likely located in that area, but outside of the range depicted by the red circle.
Possible it could have still been at Peachtree Landing?
Possible.
What would make a phone receive a GPS signal at 3:37:32, but not receive a GPS signal at 3:42:27?
If there's an obstruction between the device and the GPS satellites.
The phone could have become obstructed at some point.
Correct.
Is there anything significant about this location data point?
This is the last location data that we received from Heather Elvis's phone.
Thank you, Mr. Eads. Mr. Eads, I'm going to ask that you come off the witness stand for 1 second.
Sorry, that's my fault.
Yes. Your assistance. Mr. Eads, could I get you to write in what time that last dual coordinate occurred? And can I ask you to write in, just for the record, what is significant about that time again? Thank you, Mr. I'll take the mark back. Mr. Eads, I'm also Mr. Edens, let me show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit 66. Are you familiar with Horry County?
No.
Right side. Mr. Edens, I'm going to ask you to look at this particular location. Does that appear to be a fair and accurate location as to where 541 Wright River Drive is? Heather Elvis is the resident?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to ask you to look at this location. 6699 Peachtree Road, Peachtree Landing. Have you been there?
Yes, I have.
Does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of where that is located on the map?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Edens. You may turn to your seat. Mr. Edens, you mentioned in regards to the cell tower data, is that useful in determining whether someone has traveled a great distance?
When I teach police officers to use it in investigations, I teach them to use it for general location information, not specific, down to a house, down to a street, just general location information.
Okay. Generally speaking, from your review of the cell tower, or how much cell tower data do you have in regards to Heather Elvis in this case, or the Heather Elvis phone records in this case?
You know how many cell tower records?
Well, for what time frame?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
For what time frame?
What time do my records go from?
Yes.
The ones that we've introduced in the court start at 1:13:10 and end at 3:42:27 seconds.
Not regarding the Google coordinates,
Okay.
but the actual cell phone records that you review.
I'd have to refer to my report.
You did the record reflection showing the witness wasn't marked for identification purposes, State 67. What is that document I just handed you?
This is the report that I completed for the solicitor's office.
Will that refresh your recollection as to the time frame that the phone records provided were for?
Yes.
All right. If you would, please take a look at that so you can provide an answer.
So the call records from T-Mobile cover the time frame from 7/17/2013 at 6:44 and 39 seconds in the morning to 12/18/2013 at 3:41 and 5 seconds.
All right. I've got to do a little math again, so bear with me. About 5 months of information.
I think it's closer to 6, Councilman.
Okay. You're the expert. During that time frame, based on your review of that information, did it appear that Heather Elvis would routinely travel great distances away from Horry County?
I looked at the total location data for Heather Elvis's phone, and I didn't see her travel, not precisely sure of the county boundaries, but if she did travel outside of Horry County, it wasn't very far.
Now, you stated that cell tower data is not beneficial for house-to-house type of location data. Is Google beneficial for that?
It is.
And is Google what you mostly relied upon?
When it's available, that's what I rely upon.
For comparison's sake, how did the cell tower data that you reviewed compare to the Google information that you reviewed?
Well, again, the cell tower data would show in general terms an area of coverage where the phone likely was, but that area of coverage could be several miles worth of territory.
Did the cell tower data confirm the findings that you made on the Google data?
They were consistent.
Consistent. Bear with me for 1 second, Mr. Hughes. You stated earlier that the Google operating system maintained these coordinates and these data points, correct?
Well, the Android operating system collects the information and then stores it under the umbrella of the user's Google account, which is their Gmail account.
would this information be available in the same manner on an iPhone?
If the iPhone has a Google application installed on it, we are able to see similar information. But if it's not, we do not see that same information.
So not every iPhone will be able to provide the same information.
That's
as the
correct.
cellular. Thank you, Mr. Edens. That's all the questions that I have.
Mr. Edens, you were contacted by law enforcement, or the solicitor's office, I should say, in January of 2015. Is that correct?
May I refer? I
Yes,
believe it
yes,
was.
please.
I believe
I've got
it
your
was.
report here, same report.
I believe it was March, Council.
March 26th,
Yes, sir.
2015?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that's about 1 month after they arrested my client?
Not aware of that.
Okay. And you are aware that that's a year and 3 months after Heather Elvis disappeared?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when they contacted you, and let me back up, what day did you complete your work? And I don't need exact date. You give me a ballpark month and year. Complete your report here.
Yeah, I would say I submitted a final report to the solicitor's office roughly January of this year.
Okay. So you did this work between March 26, 2015 and January 2016,
Yes.
roughly. Now, when they contacted you, and you testified to this, tell me if you remember, they only asked you to examine from 1:13 and 10 seconds a.m., 12:18:13 and forward, correct?
At that time, no.
All right, what time did they ask that?
Well, at that time, the solicitor's office asked me to look at the entire Google location records that started on 12/17, 2013 at, I believe, 10 o'clock in the evening through the 18th. I was asked to further narrow my examination in subsequent conversation.
Okay, so then was your examination that you're testifying here today about narrowed to 1:13 and 10 seconds a.m., 12:18:13 and forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that's what we're dealing with today in terms of your expertise in the locations.
That's correct.
All right. Did they ever ask you to do the same thing with the phone number associated with Sidney Moorer?
They did not.
Could you have done that?
I don't know if there was a Google account associated with the phone. Yeah.
Okay. But you were not asked to look into that?
No, I was not.
Okay. Did they ever give you a phone number associated with a Stephen Schiraldi and ask you during this same time period to do this type work for that number?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Let me clarify, Counselor. I don't know if they gave me the phone number, but they did not ask me to do any work on it.
That's what I'm asking. Thank you. Now, do your records show from 1:13 and 10 seconds a.m., 12:18:13, any phone calls to Heather from Stephen Schiraldi, where he would have called her after he dropped her off and got home? Do you recall that?
I don't have those records, so I don't have that data.
Okay. Now, when we go through the issue with where this phone was, we are talking about where this phone was, correct?
That's correct.
We're not talking about where, you're not testifying where a person was?
No, I'm not.
All right. And you are further not talking about where a particular vehicle is?
That's
correct? So you cannot testify whether or not Heather was in possession of this phone at that time, correct?
I cannot testify to that.
You cannot testify whether or not she was in her own vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
You cannot testify that if she were in her own vehicle, that she had somebody in the vehicle with her, correct?
That's correct.
Or that if she were in a vehicle in this route, that it was even her vehicle. Is that correct? You cannot testify then that her vehicle was, when the phone was at the apartment she was staying at, you cannot testify that her vehicle was even present there at that time?
I can only testify to the movements of the phone, Counsel.
Okay. Now, have you got a copy of this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you refer to that with me?
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to pull up the thing because we've seen it, but I'm just going to go back through a couple things with you. All right, if you go to the third page, 2:42 a.m. to 2:56 a.m. Looking at that one?
Yes, sir.
And first thing I want to ask you about this, when you see, you've done this work long enough, when you see duration phone calls of 7 seconds, particularly to a payphone, and 0.2 seconds, 4.8 seconds, does that indicate an unanswered call generally?
Well, with respect to the 7.2 and the 7.8 second phone calls, those could be theoretically very short duration phone calls. With respect to the 0.2 seconds and the 4.8 seconds, in my experience, those would likely be unanswered phone calls.
Okay. So can you look at that first phone call? Let's just assume somebody picked up the payphone, 7.2 seconds with the call, the ring, and everything. Can you estimate how long a phone call that could be?
Well, it would be 7.2 seconds from beginning to end. There's no way of knowing how long the phone rang if it was answered, so.
All right. Now, looking at that same sheet, what you've circled here is the back parking lot of 5040 Carolina Forest Boulevard.
That's correct.
And have you learned that to be Longbeard's Restaurant and Bar?
I have.
Okay. And again, you pretty specifically circled the back parking lot of that establishment, correct?
That's correct.
Can you testify whether or not, based on this report, that Heather went into that establishment?
I can't tell you whether Heather did. I can tell you her phone did not.
Okay. Okay. But Heather?
I can't testify. I can testify the movements of the phone, sir.
All right. Can you testify whether she met anybody there?
I cannot.
Okay. And can you give me the approximate time that she was stationary at that location?
Can I refer to my report?
Yes.
From 2:42 and 14 seconds through 2:50 and 30 seconds, her phone was stationary.
Okay. And on the sheet that we were looking at before, the 256, the additional 6 minutes is she's making movement?
There is movement there's a different location which would indicate movement at 2:51 and 40 seconds. And then again at 2:53 and 11 seconds, where the phone is then stationary until 2:56 and 11 seconds.
Okay, so but is that movement within there, is that within the same location we're talking about?
It is.
Okay. So in other words, those periods of time, that just means that the phone is moving, but we're still at Longbeard's.
That's correct.
Okay. And that gives us 256 minus 242, roughly 14 minutes.
That's correct.
So 14 minutes, that phone is in the back parking lot or thereabouts of Longbeard Restaurant and Bar.
Yes.
And obviously, I asked this, you can't testify what was going on there.
No.
And the next page, please, 257 to 301. And let me ask you, the Augusta Plantation Drive, you show that she drove from, or the phone went from Longbeard's to Augusta Plantation Drive. Have you learned where Augusta Plantation Drive, what that represents?
I have.
And what is that?
So it's a roadway to a housing complex.
Okay. And did it go to that housing complex?
No, it did not.
Okay. And before, or sometime before getting there, it turned around and went back to Longbeards.
That's correct.
And in that short distance, she went there. She didn't stop because she didn't go there, right? She turned around and came back.
Well, the GPS records, of which there are 4, are all identical, which would indicate one of two things: that it's either stationary or that there is no available location technology, so it reports the last known location.
So it's possible that she started to go towards the other destination and turned right around and went back to Longbeards.
Well, it's possible that the last 4 hits before her phone traveled to Augusta Plantation, those were 4 stationary as well. So it could be at this point the device is moving and there's no available location technology either through GPS, Wi-Fi, or cell, and so it's reporting the prior known location.
So then at some point when it is available, it picks back up at Longbeards here.
That's correct.
Okay, and the time you have established for this period of time on this page is 2:57:04 to 3:01:57.
That's correct.
Which is, I'm sorry, I've got to do the math here. 3, 5, 4. Which is, how long?
Oh, you're
I mean,
asking
can you
me?
give me an idea, please?
I'm sorry, between
2:57, 58, 59, 3, 3:01, roughly 3.5, 4 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in this diagram, or in this report...
I'm sorry, you're referring to...
the same page.
You're referring to 25704?
Yes, sir.
301? Okay.
Yes, sir. Now, in that, we've got 3.5 to 4 minutes back at, or still at, Longbeards. And can you here tell us if she's in the parking lot, the back parking lot, the front parking lot, or is that was unable to...
Are you talking about the 30157?
Yes.
No, I would have to go to the 30242 to tell you when.
Okay, all right, we're going to that next. So let's turn to the next one, 30242. She's back at Longbeard's Bar and Restaurant.
I don't know what her phone is. I don't know if she's there. I know her phone is
I'm
there.
sorry, you're right. And that's been my point the whole time, and now I'm saying it. So she's back at the phone is back at Longbeard's. And it's from 3:02:42 to 3:15:08. Correct?
Correct.
Which I'm going to say is 12.5 to 13 minutes.
I won't argue with the council.
Okay. So for 12.5 to 13 minutes, she is back at Longbeard's Bar and Restaurant.
Her phone is, sir.
And where you have this, you don't pinpoint it in the back parking lot on this one, but it is at the Longbeard's Bar and Restaurant on that sheet.
This circle illustration is the totality of the GPS records there. The bulk of the GPS records were in a similar but different location. They were more to the east of the restaurant. If you're looking at your map, right about where the C in Carolina is where the bulk of the GPS hits were.
Okay. Now, if you turn to the next page, 3:16:22 a.m. And the second phone call you have on the activity list is a 249-second phone call, correct?
At 3:17:35, yes, sir.
Now, prior to that phone call, she had no phone calls of any significant time, and I think that one of the experts previously testified they were unanswered while she was at Longbeard's during this time. Is that correct?
Again, Counselor, I can't answer specific questions about her. I can tell you about her phone.
Okay. Court's indulgence, Your Honor, with math. All right, so based upon your report, this telephone spent roughly 30 to 31 minutes at Longbeard's. If you take the first one we said, which was 2:42:14 a.m., we agreed that was about 14 minutes.
Are you talking total minutes, sir?
Yes, total. 2:42:14, we agreed that you wouldn't argue 14 minutes.
Okay. So
The next
roughly
page.
27 minutes, give or take.
The next page, we agreed 3.5 to 4 minutes. And then the next page, we agreed 12.5 to 13 minutes. So at its most, 31 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think I'm just about done. Just for clarity's sake, again, you can offer no testimony as to what the person with the phone was doing. Only where the phone was.
Other than if they were making or receiving a phone call?
Other than that.
No.
And then, again, this is the last question, make sure that I asked, I think I did. They never asked you to do this kind of report for Sidney Moorer's number
That's correct.
for any period of time.
No.
That's all I've got, Your Honor.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
I would, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let's go to the jury room, 15 minutes. Do not forget to do it.
That one's not been marked. Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we are calling a very short witness, and then we will be calling a very long one.
That's fine, so let's plan to take the short witness, and then that should coincide with lunch.
Yes, sir. So we're got perfectly.
Thank you, you did easy, yeah. All right, hold on just a second, folks in the audience.
Hold just a second, please. If you're sitting on this side of the courtroom, I need you to utilize the facilities to your left, that is the exit of the courtroom. If you're sitting on this side of the courtroom, I need you to use the facilities to the right when you go out of the courtroom. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for working with that. Scott, you have to use both of them. You can't go.